Hello and welcome to part 7 of the SwiftUI coding tutorial. So last time, as you can see on the screen, we successfully created a network layer or a network session that uses a dependency injection for us to inside the view model so that we can easily downloading the data and we were successfully retrieving the actual data from the website. So now, for this video, we're going to focus on data model and a JSON decoder. So we can properly parsing those data into an actual data model for us to use and for us to continue develop this application here. So today that we're going to be learning about data models in Swift. And data models are actually very important aspect of any iOS or macOS application. So as they provide a structure for storing, manipulating, and retrieving data. In this video here, we're going to explore the basics of data modeling in Swift, including defining structures, creating relationships between entities, and using data models to interact with API. Before we continue, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any new videos. So before we continue with the coding part, let me quickly explain why we need a data model and why we will use struct for our data model. So let me just go ahead and create the data model file here so we can continue our conversation right here. Anyway, so basically in the Swift, a data model is a representation of the data structure and its relationships in an application. Let's write down the model. All right, so we can easily see that we're going to put in the model files inside of it. Then let's just call this create an empty Swift file. Let's just call it items for now. Yeah, items is fine. Just call it items for now. You can call anything you want, as long as you don't, as long as you like make more sense for the data. I think that's most important. So basically, he actually defines the structure of the data and the relationship between different entities in the data. So allowing the application to store, manipulate, and retrieve the data in an organized manner. So a data model is actually usually implemented as a set of classes or a struct like you see here in the Swift. And it is used to interact with like the underlying data store, whether it be a database API or other persistent storage mechanism. But in our case, it's going to be an API. Why we use a struct here instead of class? Some of you might ask. Well, basically, the structs in the Swift are actually of value types, and that allow you to define custom data types to represent a collection of related data. They are useful for modeling data in your application, and it can be actually can help you organize your code in a more modular and understandable way. And there's actually several reasons that why you might choose the using structure instead of class in a Swift. So one of the reasons is going to be the value semantics. So basically, structures are value types, and which means that when you pass a structure to a function or assign it to a constant or a variable, a copy of the original structure is created. So this actually can simplify the memory management and avoid issues with like a shared state. Another reason will be performance. Because the structures are value types, so they can be more efficient in certain situations, such as when you need to create multiple copies of the same data or pass it around between different parts of your application. The third reason would be it will be easier to reason about, I would say, because the structures are self-contained and do not have any external references. So they are often easier to understand and debug than classes. I think they might have a couple more reasons. One is simpler syntax. Structures in Swift often have a simpler syntax than classes, so making them easier to use and maintain. I think maybe one last reason would be the like a smaller footprint. I would say structures are actually smaller in size compared to classes, so which means that they can use less memory and be more performant in applications where memory is a critical concern, I would say. So yeah, in summary, structures in Swift provide a convenient and efficient way to define the custom data types, and it can be a great choice for modeling and simple data in your application. All right, so let's start code our data model here, and we will use the API JSON as a guide to help us define the data model variables. All right, so here you can see that's our JSON from last video here, and we were able to successfully retrieving the data with our URL session. Now we want to create our dedicated data model with this basically similar structure. So if you look at this, this is actually a giant array that from top to bottom. This bracket actually representing an array here. Then inside this curly bracket here is representing a JSON, or I mean, sorry, is representing a dictionary. So basically, you can view this as an array that contains many of this type of dictionaries, and they are all share the same key, but some of them might have different values, but that is okay. So basically, based on those, we want to create our data models. So let's just remember them, or we can just easily copy it over. Basically, we want a name, image URL, type, description. Those are pretty much the thing we need. Let's just copy this over, and then we can start coding from others, in our data model struct. All right, so here we go. Here's our copied over key names. So let's use those information, start coding. Let's just comment them out so we don't, so the compiler of this Xcode does not complain anything about it. So since we're in a giant array of dictionaries, so we might also want to create another one. Let's call it struct item. And then this one, let's just call it item, maybe items response or item response. Okay, item response. And item response is going to be a giant array. So let's see, let maybe items. That's going to be an array of item. Or we can just call it response. So we can easily differentiate them. Then right in here, we're gonna say we're gonna use let here. You could use var. I think use a var is better option here, since we're gonna be calling codable. I'll explain the JSONDecoder in a bit, so you understand what that for. Basically, Codable provides you a way to decode and encoding data from a actual data to decode into a model, from a model to encode that, or encoding any maybe a string or anything into a data. So we're going to use the Codable, basically contain both, or you can use the encodable or decodable, but normally just use Codable so it covers both ways just in case. Let's just call it codable. Then let's use var in case, right? In case if we want to encode anything to making upload or anything. All right, so let's continue code the item part. So the first one is name. And from our example there, our value pretty much all the same. They are strings, so that we know for sure, and they're guaranteed to return something. Sometimes the server might not return you anything. You might need to give an optional, just in case that server will return you a null or something. So for next one, as code image URL, and just make sure you remember uh, if you need to actually make sure the variable are the same name as the key from the JSON, or I'll explain in a bit. You will need to use encoding keys. So in this case, we have a string of URL. So the benefit of using struct and a Swift is you can actually using a URL whenever it actually decoding that. The decoder actually is smart enough to actually convert that convert that string of URL directly into a URL. So that actually saves a lot of time there. So next one is going to be type. And type here, I believe it will be an enum. So we'll cover that in a bit here. So let's continue here. Description. It's going to be a string. Next, we want to use the coding keys. And there's going to be strings. So here is something that you might want to know is if you do not want to keep those variables the same, because sometimes on the JSON, the data, the key inside the JSON data sometimes might look like something like this. And maybe this first underscore name, because some of the server might use that, or something that might not look good or easier for you for the application to process the data. So that we want to have a more user-friendly name for the developer to see and to use that variable. What we can do is we can come down here, says coding key, and set it as a string type. And we can just give the whatever that server's key name here. Then it will smart enough to find the actual data of the first name and assign to this name, which will be here. So, but for now, for our case, they are all of them. They are the same, so we can ignore that for now. Next one is actually the enum type. So for enum, we can pretty much just start the typing, give a maybe, let's say, type or item type. And let's give a string type, and we also want to be using codable for those. Next, we want to figure out what are the types. So let's remove those comment out things. We don't need them anymore. Let's go back to our JSON API. Take a look. What exactly the types we need. Okay, so we're back in here again. So let's see what type we need. We need a fruit, and we have sweets. So let's just copy them over real quick. All right, so here are all our enums cases that we actually have in our JSON data there. So for now, we can just using the item type here, and whenever we're decoding this data, it will be smart enough to find exactly enum and also assign to right here. The only things though, if somehow your enum key is maybe something different, for example, like see a green fruit, you can also do like this. If this green fruit is actually a key from your JSON data, then you can do this way, and you can have a more friendly way, say, okay, that's just a fruit. So let's go back to our view model. So we try to add those into our API code there, see if we can get the data out. So right here, we're actually using, normally we're using a JSON serialization, but since we're talking about using JSONDecoder, we can actually do this. JSONDecoder and decode. We want to decode the item response and self. Basically, you want to assign that type from the piece data we got, which is the response data. Now this will give us the JSON. But before we running this to do a quick test and to see what we got from the JSON here, let me just quickly explain to you what is the JSON decoder here. So basically, the JSON decoder class in Swift is part of the foundation framework, and also it provides a way for you to decode the JSON data into Swift object. As I explained earlier, you can convert that from a piece of data into a model. So in Swift, the JSON decoder class allow you to actually take a JSON representation of data and decode into a native Swift object like the item response here, such as you can also decode that into an array, a dictionary, and a custom structure or classes. So this can be actually useful when working with the web services that return JSON data or when storing JSON data locally on the device. So the next question is, why do we need JSON decoder? So it actually simplifies the data parsing. So JSON decoder provides a simple and a convenient way to parse JSON data in Swift, saving you time and effort compared to manually parsing the data yourself. Because if you're using the JSON serialization, you need to actually cast that into a dictionary. It will be something look like this. So if I say JSON, let me just actually put that back real quick. Right, so you have this here. So if we come back in as a giant array, traditionally we also need to do something like this, since that's an array of a dictionary. And then the dictionary's value can be any type. Like it could be a integer, it could be Boolean, it could be string, or it could be anything, or it could be another array or another dictionary. So we want to cast that into this format. Then whenever that happens, we want to retrieve, for example, maybe let the first data equal to JSON. So now JSON is a giant dictionary that contains a let's just do this for now for demonstration, so it doesn't not complain about it. So the JSON now, let me comment this out. It's confusing there. Okay. So the JSON now is a giant array of a dictionary. Now you want to get the first thing. You want to use adding a 0, so that you get the first index into this array, which is the first data in there. And then after that, you might want to retrieve something like maybe first username equal to a first data. Then first data now is a dictionary, as you can see right here. So assuming that we know for sure in the first dictionary that have a username, then traditionally we also want to add in the actual API's the key for the JSON right here. Then we have to cast that into as a string, and then we have to check, see if this is a optional or non-optional manually. So imagine that we're going to do this for all the data. That's going to be a lot of work there. But JSON decoder saves a lot of time. We can skip all those parts. It will handle everything automatically. Even if you have anything potentially optional, there's also a way to handle the optional inside JSON, inside your to utilize the codable to handle anything optional or not. So that's one of the benefits there. You don't have to manually parsing the data yourself. Next one is actually consistent and reliable, I would say. JSON decoder actually uses the foundation framework to parse JSON data. So providing a consistent and a reliable way to handle JSON data across different platforms and applications. Another one will be type safety. JSON decoder actually allows you to define the structure of your data. Using Swift structures or classes, providing like type safety and helping to prevent maybe common errors such as incorrect data types or missing fields. Because whenever you are missing something or some fields are wrong, whenever you are handling this try here, because it's actually throwing some error back. You have to eventually handle this like this. You have to catch the error, which will returns a, if you put this right inside this do, this catch will actually catches whatever the error come back. And that also can be including a maybe including something and telling you you're missing something in your data or something like that. There's also a error key in here. You can actually handle it. Don't remember exactly, but you can go ahead and look up. It should be pretty simple. But for our demonstration, well, let's just put that back. So in conclusion, the JSON decoder is actually a pretty important tool for working with the JSON data in Swift. And it actually simplifies the data parsing, provide consistent and reliable results. All right, so let's continue our code here so we can properly parse the JSON data into our data model. So we already did this part here. Now we want to run and do a quick test. All right, let's see what we got here after we run it. So the data couldn't be read because it isn't in the correct format. Okay, so that actually tells us something. You can see the benefit of using JSONDecoder. Now let's try to figure out why is that and try to fix this maybe the data model there so that we can get our proper data back. All right, now let's come back to here. Let's implement our do catch so we actually can see what's going on here. For this, so we want to put this right inside there, and we want to put this right over here, just for now. I think for the catch this, we want to use a decoding error, and it mentioned in the console here, it says data couldn't be read because it isn't in the correct format. So let's see exactly, do we have any option to show us what exactly format we're missing there? Data corrupted, key not found, type mismatched, volume not found. Maybe the type mismatched. Okay, so maybe let's see, we want to add a type for this. Let's just call it type for now. For this, let's call context. And we want to see we want to print what is the context? What type we're missing? So missing type. And next one, I want to say detail context. Context detail. Maybe, oh, yes, we are missing this. That coding, and we want to say context, and that should work. Let's group them together so we know exactly what's going on here. So let's say missing type, and this one's going to be the context debug description. And also let's try to use this decoding error maybe data corrupted, most not likely, but you can also handle that if you're not sure if the data could be corrupted. Key not found, which I also think that might be that's the case. I'm thinking that might be the case too. So let's say context, and we're just gonna copy this over. Let's say missing key. Let's say key here. Context the debug mode. Yeah. Next one is I think we're gonna check for error volume not found. Maybe we're missing a volume there. So let's say volume, then maybe a context here. So let's copy this over so we know that missing value, and value here, and that. Okay, so now let's try run this again, see what happens. Okay, let's see what we're missing here. Missing type, dictionary string ending. Expect a to decode dictionary string ending, but found an array instead. Okay, so we're missing some part where, let's go to data model here. So when we get this, oh yes, we were not a, the data was not a dictionary contains an array. It is a array. So in that case, what we can do is just get rid of that. Go back to your view model. We can actually putting an array right here, item, and that should give us the proper JSON we needed. So run again. I figured out here. So I'm missing a enum case here, missing a enum food type. So let's try it again. All right, now we got everything here. So you can see all our data is properly organized inside our model. So we have this item as our struct, then the name and image URL, and then the description, and this item type is a fruit. Now we got everything here. So now let's continue and try to add this onto our SwiftUI and into our application here. All right, so let's continue with this one here. So what we want is eventually we want to publish this thing. So we had this publish up here, which with array of items. So let's just put item in there. And at the beginning, of course, we don't have any items there. But once we start getting this data here, we actually will have our data. So when that happens, we can actually assign our items. And you can keep this caching here, just in case something wrong. But then, if anything else, you want to just catch an error and throw the error back. You could also just throw everything back and let the UI handles everything. Then you can eventually shows a pop-up to show the user what's going on. Or you can silently fail in here, then report this to any analytics stuff or debugging tool that you might integrate with. But for now, let's just keep that as it is, and we're gonna throw everything back. Or you can just simply delete all this. Just keep this single one there. Let's just keep single one there for a clean look. So now we have everything through this back. If there's any issues, if there's no issues, the data will be published here. Then we can actually go back to our view content view, where we have our list here. All right, looks like we're encountering some issue here, but for that issue, it's pretty easy to resolve. I believe it's due to this data here that they're not really accepting it. So if we temporarily comment them out, that error should go away. Yes, so now let's go back to our content view here, content detail view here. So we know for sure that eventually we'll want just accepting this item here. So let's get rid of everything else. And then we want to update this as well. Say a URL and item type, give it a placeholder. Now we can go back to our content view here. All right, so let's re-instantiate this detail here. Let's just pass in the item we need. And then we need to go back to the content detail to handle some more information here. So we want a picture. So for now, the picture actually come in a URL format. So we want to download that URL format. So in order to do that, we will use this so-called async image to handle this actual downloading stuff, since we already have the URL. But I also want to handle the exactly. So let's just put this image URL here, and we have this content, we have an image. So once the image download, that image will come to here. Placeholder here, you can just say do nothing for now. And you can actually put those stuff. Okay. You can just put those stuff, remove this image, and call image. And you can handle those inside there. Next one is our item's name. So item dot name and item dot type dot raw value, so we can get the string value of it. Next one is item and dot description. So that should give us the exactly the same data we were looking for. Now we go back to our content view for the list. Next thing we want to do is opening the cell view. And the cell view also, we need a title for it. So let's go to the cell view to make some change here. So we want to say, we want to pass the item here as well. So let's call item. And for exactly the image, we want to do the same thing. And we want to use this image here. Once we have this image, and we want just putting those right inside up here. And placeholder, you can say do nothing. Or you can give a default image, just in case you don't have one, just in case the async image downloading failed. Next, we want to find the title, which is the item's name. And we want to say, so we want to say something for the details. So let's just use the description. We want to make sure we want to make sure just keep at one single line here, so it does not stretch all the way. So it's okay to cut off a little bit, since we're going to go into the detailed content to see more. So let's change this. Give some default placeholders. Okay, you could change those data, and it will show up on the Swift preview, SwiftUI preview, or you don't have to. For the demo purpose, I'm just gonna give this exclamation point here. I think it's a similar situation right here. Okay, so go back to our content view and let's add back our call view, cell view, pass in our item. Do a quick view, make sure everything's good. All right, let's try see how that look like. All right, as you can see, we got our data, everything back. We can click into it. It shows the fruit is, this is the apple and it's a fruit. And that's a banana, it's a fruit, and candy is a sweet type. Steak is a meat. And you can see all the things is as the same as before, but except those data now come from the API instead. All right, so and that's it for this tutorial on the data model and the JSON decoder in SwiftUI. Um, we're so we've seen how to use JSON decoder to parse JSON data into Swift object or data model in our case, and why this is an important tool for working with the JSON data in your applications. So whether you are working with the web services or store JSON data locally, JSONDecoder actually provides a simple and a convenient way for you to parse the JSON data into Swift objects. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any new videos. And thank you for watching, and until next time, happy coding.